In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, it is part two of a two-part series. First, we did Who is Rising in Leif Thulin's opinion, and now we are going to talk about the guys that Leif believes is falling. Stay tuned to hear Leif's thoughts on VJ Edgecombe, Egor Demin, Will Riley, and more. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, along with my co-host, Leif Thulin, the man that watches more college basketball than anyone else. And we want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. And new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Also, check out the Locked On newsletter delivered daily to your inbox. Get out LockedOnDaily.com, whichever NBA team you support. I know in Leafs case, it is the Utah Jazz. So you can check it out. Again, Locked On Daily, a newsletter delivered right to your inbox. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, share, comment. Click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode. All right, Leif, let's get right into this. It's our second episode of the day. We talked about the guys that you believe are rising. So we covered from Danny Wolf to Donnie Freeman to Kobe Brea. We talked about Ace Bailey, Ian Jackson. Now let's talk about some guys who you believe their draft stock is falling. But before we get into that, I want to mention one thing. I was speaking with someone recently, and they were basically raving about how much they love your draft takes. And the comment was basically saying, I like Leif because we know Leif isn't tied in to different agencies. He doesn't have some of the relationships that a lot of the bigger name draft guys have. And he mentioned that a lot of times because of relationships that some guys aren't going to be overly critical about a player because they don't want to damage the relationship. He was saying Leif Thulin doesn't have those relationships, so he is going to speak his mind. He doesn't care who it offends. He's going to be totally honest, and we do not have a lot of that in the draft world. So that being said, we know that these takes are going to be brutally honest Leif Thulin takes. So in your opinion.
I mean, the other thing is, and this is, I don't mean it as a slight to anyone. I don't really read anyone's work of what they're saying because I'm easily influenced. I watch a ton of basketball. If I read it, and then I'll look for it. So I try to just have an absolutely clear mind when I read it. And I'll talk to Rafael, I talk to James, I talk to Richard. But mostly I'll have my own stuff. And then we talk about our different evaluations off the air. So these come in absolutely unbiased and unwavering. So I think two of these will be pretty darn critical. And I don't mean it as a slight to those guys, but I'll give you the unabashed truth here.
Yeah, and that's what people have I don't want to say grown to respect because it sounds like they didn't at first, but that's one of the things that people respect. All right, let's get right into it. Who is a player that his draft stock is tumbling, in your opinion?
Well, VJ Edgecombe, I've been low on for a long time, and every time we've done any of these stock checks, he's been on the low one, but he just keeps getting worse for me.
Especially in big games.
The only trait he has to me is he's a good rebounder. He's a great athlete. He's a great run and jump athlete. But even defensively, he doesn't wow me. Iowa State's guards had no issues with him defending them. It was kind of a bumpy, bruisey type game, and yet an athlete didn't impose as well. He had 4 points on 1 of 9 shooting. And Iowa State's really good. They're great defensively. But VJ Edgecombe can't shoot. And for as great an athlete as he is, he doesn't put much pressure on the rim. How is that possible?
He's too straight up, in my opinion. When on his drive to the rim, he doesn't get low. You always heard the term low man wins. And one of the first things I noticed about him when I watched him in high school was that he could get to the rim, but he was always like straight up. And to me, I think that is one of the reasons why the rim pressure isn't where I thought it would be.
I'm going to say something that I've said before. So if you've heard this, bear with me. But I watched him play against Cooper Flag in high school. And I know Montverde was really, really good. So I didn't expect him and his team to win, but I expected the number 2 or at least a top 5 recruit in the country to be apparent on the TV. I didn't even notice him. And I'm not saying that to like rub dirt in the graves, metaphorically speaking here. But I really watched the game and I was like, oh, this Derek Queen kid's really good. Oh, like this Robert Wright guy who's now his teammate at Baylor, like he's really good. Robert Wright's a way better basketball player right now than VJ Edgecombe. Like if you watch Baylor play, VJ Edgecombe's the second best freshman. And so he's going to probably declare, and he's probably still going to go in the lottery because someone's going to fall in love with upside. But I just don't see it. Like he doesn't shoot well. His shot's not pretty to me. So it's not just he's missing and it's close. It doesn't look good off the hands to me. He doesn't put pressure on the rim. He should be the best run and jump athlete every time he's on the floor. And you're not seeing run and jump. Like think about some of the previous run and jump athletes we had, like Keon Johnson, Jaden Springer, guys like that. Well, those guys were tenacious defensively. I don't see VJ Edgecombe doing anything to impact the game defensively. And you know, like you can scheme up backdoor lobs and stuff and like activity. I just don't see the activity you'd expect. The only activity I see is rebounding. And he has a couple assists, but like those are system assists, just like swing the ball extra pass, like someone hits a 3. So yeah, I am not in on him whatsoever. I will not be taking him in the lottery no matter what really happens. I just don't see the skill set translating to the NBA.
Do you give him a little bit of a pass because of the Keontae George Baylor situation? And do you also factor in how well he played with the Bahamas this summer? Or are you saying that small sample size is not enough for you?
Well, the thing about the Bahamas is you'd be saying, oh, like, okay, maybe with more spacing, he'd be able to attack the rim more. Well, we've kind of talked about it. He doesn't like look to do it. And then he shot well there. I don't believe in the shot. As for the Keontae George thing, Keontae George had games. He was inconsistent, but he had games where he looked the part of the Jamal Murray part that we thought he'd be playing against Canada and Italy in the U23s, where he scored 37 and 32 points. He had games like that. He went to Fog Allen Fieldhouse and hit 4 straight threes in the first half against Kansas. And you're like, wow, like that's rare. Then I went to the combine with Keontae George and I watched his pro day, and he had the best pro day of anyone there. So like he had things that didn't go right for him. He put on extra weight, played a position that wasn't his position. Like none of that stuff is necessarily true of VJ, at least to my knowledge. Like he's not a point guard. He's playing the position 2 or 3 that he should be playing, and he's getting opportunities to score. He's just not taking them and certainly not making them. Keontae didn't shoot well at Baylor, but he had games where he scored 30 points. And VJ is not like he scored 19 against Utah, and I know it's a Big 12 point, but I live in Utah. Utah's terrible, absolutely awful. And so, like, that's his best game. I know you point at Tennessee, but Tennessee scored 20 in garbage time.
Yeah, and they were, I mean, at one point, Chaz Lanier had more points than Baylor. Like, the majority of the first half, I believe.
Yeah, so I'm out. I hope I'm wrong. Like, I always root for these guys to succeed. I just don't see it for VJ Edgecombe. And it sucks because he was touted as top 5. So if you had a normal freshman coming in with these numbers, you'd be like, okay, like, nice. But like he'll be seen as a disappointment, and that's unfortunate for him. But like if I'm drafting in the top 10, which my Utah Jazz are, I'd be staying far away from VJ Edgecombe.
The numbers are 11.7 points, 5.9 rebounds, 3.3 assists, but he's shooting 40% from the floor, 28% from 3, 70% from the foul line, and he's just let's just be honest, he's had some absolute stinkers against good competition. 1 of 9 against Iowa State, which was ranked number 3. 2 of 11 against Gonzaga. 3 of 12 against that stingy Arkansas defense. 4 of 15 versus St. John's. And I was joking about Arkansas defense being stingy. The best game on paper against a good team was 8 of 16 against Tennessee, but that was a game that they lost 77-62, and the game was over within the first 5 minutes. The Utah game, like you said, he said Utah stinks, but he had he was 6 of 10 from the floor, had 19 points. I think that was a game where there were some people that are they haven't sold their stock and thought maybe he's going to turn the corner. But to me, those numbers against good teams is really, really alarming. And I'm with you. I have a mock draft coming out, and I don't have him in the lottery. I know I'm going to get some flack for it, but I don't care. But I just don't see the same player that I saw this summer. And then even if you talk about him being 3-and-D, I spoke with someone this weekend that is from the New York area and scouted him heavily, and they were like, he's 6'3". So at
And that's
6'3",
the other thing. I've said this so many times this summer. I forgot to say it here. There's no way on earth he's 6'5".
Yeah,
and like he's 6'3" as a 3, and so you could say he's out of position, like we were talking about Keontae. But no, he's not out of position because like you want him to be playing the bigger role in the same way that like Seth Trimble has to, because you just don't have the personnel to play bigger unless they were to start Langston Love, and you're not going to bench a guy that you thought at one point was going to be a top 5 pick. So, that's the other thing that's a big deterrent, because you don't have the length that you thought you had.
Yeah. So, all right, up next, we're going to talk about Egor Demin. Egor was hot as fish grease to start the season and has definitely cooled down. Injury played a part in it, but Leif is going to share his thoughts on why he believes Egor's stock is on the decline. Before we get into the second segment, let's talk about Prize Picks, because it is cold outside, but basketball season is heating up, and there is no better way to get real money action while watching your favorite NBA stars than with Prize Picks. Whether you are a diehard fan or just love friendly competition, Prize Picks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. And here's how it works. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. 1,000 times your cash. So think LeBron is going to drop 30 points, or maybe Luka is going to get more than 8 assists. Prize Picks lets you pick your predictions and put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. Right now is the absolute perfect time to join, because if you download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA, you get $50 instantly when you place your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win to get in the bonus. It is guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, second segment. Egor Demin, a guy that, like I mentioned, just got off to a phenomenal start. Yes, it was against the likes of, I think it was like Central Arkansas. Was it California Riverside or California Davis or something like that? Queens College, which I had never heard of. I think they recently became Division I. He had a big game against Idaho. There was a game against Mississippi Valley State, but he didn't really like have a monster game there. They were up big. Then Thanksgiving break came, and it was Ole Miss, NC State, Providence. He had an 0-for-10 game against Providence. Got hurt. Missed about 25 days. Well, I don't want to say 25 days of action, but there was like a 25-day gap between the Providence game and then I believe it was Arizona State. And then in his last 2 games, if I'm not mistaken, he's only combined for like 7 points. He has more assists than points, but he's been brutal from the floor. So what are your thoughts on Egor at the moment?
So the Jazz, working with them, you obviously see the ties to BYU. You see Danny Ainge, who's obviously front office with the Jazz, legend at BYU, and everyone's like, "Oh, Danny's going to bring his guy in." And I was talking with some people, and my thinking was like, I feel like I'd hear even more buzz if it was actually true that like Egor was the guy, and it made me start to wonder if Danny wasn't all that moved. And he's a sphinx, someone you can't read whatsoever. Like, he's notorious for being difficult to trade with and all these things, and he's very shrewd in his picks. But there was no real buzz of like outside of just fans saying, "Oh, it'd be cool to bring Egor Demin," but then you'd read their bio and it'd be a BYU fan. So I say all that to say this: Egor Demin had a great start, but like you mentioned, it was against Central Arkansas, it was against Queens College, and he was whipping passes around. But what people actually were excited about was he was knocking down threes. Well, the reason he was knocking down threes is because people were playing him to make him shoot it. And now teams that play him to make him shoot it have the athletes to contest those shots. They have the athletes to make his passes less obvious. So he goes and plays Houston. And that's not why I'm dropping him. I've been a little bit lower on him for a little while. But Houston does this thing when they defend where they trap the ball screen and hedge it at the same time. Like it's a hedge. And then somehow JoJo Tugler, who's an unbelievable defender, recovers from a hedge and a trap all the way back. If you get the ball to the roll guy and he blocks that shot, that happened to Kebaketa multiple times. And it's honestly astounding. But Egor Demin looked like a deer in headlights the entire time against Houston. He was uncomfortable. He made no passes that you were like, okay, like he can handle this athleticism. And that's not to say he can't, but I just think that if you were to put Kasparas Jakubonis, someone who has a similar profile and makeup in terms of he played in Europe, he's too mature to be bothered by the college game. It looks easy for him. Kasparas would score against that defense, and he would get other people looks because he has the threat of himself to score. Egor Demin scores as a second resort to his passing. And honestly, I think it's admirable to watch, but it doesn't move me in the same way because he's not the threat to score, and his athleticism is kind of like, yes, he can dunk if he gets a long runway, and he's longer than Kasparas, but he's not a quick, twitchy athlete, and he's not the shooter or natural scorer that Kasparas is. So I think when you look at the top 10 guys, you start to realize like he has fewer differentiating traits that can hold up at the next level.
At the very minimum, Jakubonis would have found a way to get to the foul line.
Yeah.
Like he hasn't had many off shooting nights, but you know that he's going to get to the line 5 attempts a game. And with Egor, I mean, in his last 2 games, he's attempted 2 free throws total in 56 minutes. Against Arizona State and Houston, he is a combined 3 for 14. And I'll admit, I was very, very high on Egor. I had him as a top 10 pick coming into the season. I moved him up to as high as number 4 after just the phenomenal start to the season. I did say that I did recognize the competition wasn't tough, and I did mention when I had him ranked as high as peak that I was interested in seeing how he performed against Ole Miss during that Thanksgiving break. I think some of it is the injury, but I just think some of it is teams have figured him out, that if you get in this airspace and make him uncomfortable, it takes away how good he is. It takes away his vision and the passing. I do think one thing that has been addressed is that he's probably not a point guard and that he's more so of a secondary playmaker and a connector, which I think helps him a little bit, or I shouldn't say helps him. It saves him because he's 6'9". If he were 6'2" or 6'3", and you know the flaws were magnified like this, then you could say his stock would just absolutely take a tumble. But I think at 6'9", with his ability to pass, I do think that there are some teams that still would take a flyer on him, maybe in the late lottery. But the big concern is the shooting. He's always been a player, and I've followed him for years. His reputation as a shooter has been bigger than the actual results. And in theory, you want him to be a good shooter because the shot looks clean, the mechanics looks good, but he just hasn't been a lights out shooter over his career in Europe. And right now the 3-point shooting is down to 32%, but that's something to monitor going forward. All right, let's talk about Will Riley. I had a chance to watch him live against Oregon, and I had Will Riley as a potential late lottery pick, maybe just a few weeks ago. And I love the fact that I've been wrong and my list has been fluid throughout the season. But after watching him against Oregon, and it was a game that they won by 30 points, one of the things that really stood out to me watching him live is that he needs to come back another year and just develop physically. If you put a stronger person on him, he's going to really struggle. He's one of the younger players in the draft. So, I mean, that's totally fine if he does decide to come out. But I think it's in his best interest to come back to school because to me, it just makes more sense to play college basketball next year as opposed to going to the NBA where guys are even more physical and stronger, and you're going to be even limited even more. But why is Will Riley dropping, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't do anything on the floor for Illinois other than space, and that's a great thing to do, but his shooting's plummeting because he's only out there to shoot, so people just know to run him off the line, and then as soon as he puts it on the floor, he gets bumped off the ball. He draws fouls in the strangest way because he's so slender. Then he gets fouled and he makes free throws, so half his points, I mean, probably not actually half, but like a large portion of his points have come from the free throw line because of like those type of fouls that are like 1-and-1s. And he's a good shooter and he's got great touch. I think he'll be a good prospect down the road, but right now he's nowhere near ready to handle the pressure of collegiate basketball in terms of the better athletes that can speed him up and bump him off the ball. And then defensively, he's just not he's nimble, but he's not athletic and twitchy that way. So he's got a athletic growth year in terms of he just needs to get stronger and learn to be a little quicker with his feet as well. So I think he could be a really good pick next year. 31 points day one made everyone really excited, but I think that was a bit of fool's gold, and he's going to have another year at Illinois or within college basketball at least.
Yeah, he's definitely cooled off since then. And like I said, it was just apparent that he needs to get stronger. And especially for a guy that's not like super quick and not like a high level athlete. And so I think adding a little bit more craft is going to help him out. And then the shooting is down to 40% from the floor, 35% from three is respectable. All right, up next, we're going to talk about Collin Murray-Boyles and Khaman Maluach, two guys that Leif believes their stock is dropping. But before we get into the last segment, we got to talk about FanDuel, because from big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, whether you win or you lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything, absolutely everything you need for live bets, same game, parlays, and so much more. And with FanDuel, you can bet on who's going to score the first touchdown, the first interception, so much more. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, last segment. Let's start with Khaman Maluach. I still think that he's playing like I expected. I think that he's raw. I think that his potential is going to outweigh his production. He's shooting about 78% from the floor. I think he's been fine. The one thing that I will say I'm a little bit disappointed in, and it's not the three-point shooting. I didn't think that he was going to have the freedom to shoot threes, even though there's some upside there as a shooter. But the 1.1 blocks per game, I thought that he would be much more of a dominant rim protector. And I know rim protection isn't always about blocks, but I did think the block numbers weren't going to be high. What are your thoughts on Maluach, and why is he falling in your opinion?
Well, I think I came in very, very high on him. I thought, well, if he can play and guard Anthony Davis over the summer, then he can come into Duke and dominate. And maybe it's just a comparison, but Malik Brown, their backup center, is better than he is.
Yeah.
He's more disruptive, and they're better defensively with Malik Brown in. And that's not a knock to Maluach, but what it is okay, where would he be better than Brown though? Like if you were a prospect, where should he shine? Like you said, block numbers not great. It's about deterrence though, and he does deter, and Duke's an excellent defense. And then the other thing would be lob threat. He can't catch. Like he cannot catch a basketball. And I know we talk about raw, and there's these videos of Joel Embiid when he's 17. And you're like, well, Embiid can develop. Embiid's an anomaly, and Khaman Maluach really struggles to catch the ball on lobs, and he struggles to catch the ball on short rolls. He has good touch when he has the ball in his hands, but he's just not for as that long and athletically imposing as he should be. He doesn't wow me as an athlete. It's more the physical bodies there, but the athletic springiness, the twitchiness, the length isn't put into fruition, and so that's it's like hard to describe because they're really good defensively and he is a good defender, but it should be more. And I expected more. So I think comparatively he's dropping for me.
Yep. All right, let's talk about Collin Murray-Boyles, a player that I'll be honest, I haven't had him in my top 25 all year, not because of the production. I just don't see the fit. I just do not see his role in the NBA, especially as a undersized four that doesn't space the floor. Why is Collin Murray-Boyles dropping in your opinion?
Precisely that. So I'm in the exact same boat. I haven't had him high at all, but you go through any mock draft and you see him around the lottery or within the lottery. And so if people are listening to this and they're like, well, they never talk about this guy, so I figured I'd bring him up. You're typically not going to see a guy that lasts in the NBA who can't shoot that is not a 5 unless they're an otherworldly athlete and someone who defends the ball at an unbelievable level. And even those guys are few and far between, no matter the length of those guys, because shooting is becoming the commodity. Well, he doesn't provide spacing. I don't view him as an otherworldly athlete. He's productive because he's crafty. He's got long arms. He's a good rebounder. He's got good moves near the post. But none of that stuff moves me for what the NBA has. Like, if this were 15 years ago, like, could he be Carl Landry, something like that? Maybe. Yeah. Like, but the fact that Carl Landry is a name that pops in my mind, and then because I've been watching basketball since I've been like 2 years old, it's like that's not an alluring thing because that's not a type of basketball player that would thrive today. And I just don't see the athleticism because he has like burst, but it's like short area burst, and it's not necessarily anything that like moves me for his defensive upside either. So I just don't see the fit. I think he's a good basketball player, productive, but just not NBA oriented the way the NBA is now.
Yeah, I agree. All right, here's one for you, and we're going to wrap on this. I spoke with a scout, and he basically is on the same page we're on. He asked me who was his NBA comparison. I couldn't think of one. And then I've seen people throw out Julius Randle. I don't see that. This scout said Collin Murray-Boyles' best NBA comp is Terry Taylor. What are your thoughts on that?
I just don't know if that bodes very well. Like,
and that's what he was saying. Like, you're not taking Terry Taylor first round. He's like, yeah, when Terry Taylor gets minutes in April for NBA team, he's productive. He's gonna put up big numbers in the G League. But he was saying, like, do you take Terry Taylor in the first round?
No. Especially, and the worst part about it is that that's an archetype of basketball that works in college, as you're seeing, and that's in the SEC. But as the SEC play, and when they play the upper echelon teams, he might put up some numbers, but they're never going to win, and that's not necessarily his fault. But then they're going to play the Auburn, they're going to play some of these Alabama with length, and the length is going to be a detractor for him because he's got long arms, but he's short, and he creates space with his body. Then you go to the NBA, no one wants contested two balls. Like, an example of this in a totally different world is how great Kenny Lofton Jr. was at scoring with his body. And they're totally different body types. But the reason I bring that up is I saw him with the Jazz briefly. And I would see him and I was like, man, like, he's fun to watch and he carves up space. But there's a reason that he was ineffective in the long term, because when you put the true NBA athletes out there, the ones that actually get minutes and the ones you would be drafting at the top, he doesn't score. And he doesn't score, and then he's a defensive liability. Now, I'm not sure Collin Murray-Boyles would be a defensive liability, but it's the same thing. He doesn't score, and that's the upside, is kind of the physicality he plays with. So as for Terry Taylor, I think that is a good comparison. But like Terry Taylor, I looked it up because I wasn't sure I was right. He's 6'4", 230 pounds. Murray-Boyles is a little bit bigger, but the fact that you're comparing him to like a small ball punisher is a dangerous thing to do, because why would you draft him in the lottery? So I'm glad you're on the same page as me on this one. And maybe we're wrong, but I feel pretty confident about our assessment.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people that have him top 5. There's some people that really like him. And when I say some people, I'm talking about like draft enthusiasts on social media. I just don't see a world where he's getting post touches in the NBA, and I just don't see a world where there is a lot of time for an undersized 4 that doesn't space the floor, especially when spacing is so important in today's game. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. We got 2 of them for you today. If you missed the first one, check it out, which is Leaf's biggest risers over the past few weeks. Also, check out the Locked On newsletter at lockedondaily.com. But once again, it's Rafael and Leif Thulin, and we are out of here.